Hey everyone, Don here. Okay, this is the illustration of Theon Greyjoy from Game of Thrones. And but before we get into the actual video of the drawing process, just wanted to spend a few moments and just give you a quick overview of the workflow process, the program that I use, and some of the tools that I use to create this. So with that said, we'll just start. Yes, this is the finished illustration. Alright, so that's our end result. But let's just start with the grid system. If you've watched any of my videos, you've seen some of them where I start out with a grid system, and this is to help me with my proportions and positioning of the characters that I draw. I don't use it all the time, but this time I did. So there's the grid system. Real quick note, I got a little bit of a white hash mark right there, and that's just a point of reference to keep me oriented, so that I don't always have to count down from the top X amount of squares and from the right X amount of squares to orient myself. It's there, and maybe in a future video I can do a step-by-step on how to utilize the grid system. I will turn that off. Generally, if I'm going to work on a drawing, not all the time, but just generally, I'll start out with a neutral gray. My tool sets are, the majority of the illustration was done with, right up here in the upper left corner is the real 2B pencil. And so I'll just, for right now, create a new layer. This is the real 2B pencil. Alright. Now I'm also using a Intuos Pro tablet by Wacom and a pressure sensitive stylus. And it has a really nice tilt feature, so that if I were to tilt my stylus, you can actually see how the nib changed its size from that side, almost straight up and down, to tilting it, and it broadens out the brush. Alright, so real 2B pencil. Alright, the next thing that I will use is airbrush. And then there's a variety of different brushes that I use in this, and veritable spray. Let me just make the brush just a little bit smaller. This is what a veritable spray looks like. The next one, well, let's just switch that over and we'll sprinkle. Make the brush just a little bit smaller. But I use this a lot to create texture, a little bit of noise within the illustration, and to push things back. Pixel spray, it's pretty much the same, just a little bit denser. So you'll just want to play around with the size and the different variables that you can get with each of these sliders up here. I rarely use the sliders. I kind of just grab them and I roll with them, just see what happens. Again, airbrush. I've used that a couple of times. Alright, next couple of items, I will use digital watercolor. Alright, I've used the broad brush water. Do that. And this was just to create a wash that went behind our character's head. Alright. Now keep in mind that just like real watercolor, if you're to lift your brush, it's going to react to the layer underneath. So it will make it a little bit darker. So if that's the effect you want, go for it. If not, you want more of a continuous tone, then make sure that you do it in one go. And then you can always just work over it. The next one was, let me find that. That one was actually, I believe, not necessarily, it would be in real watercolor, not the digital watercolor. Now it's going to take a moment here. Alright. I'm going to work over it. And this was just to create that splatter effect that was below Theon's chest armor. And that was pretty much it. So you have, once again, I'm going to go right here to pens and pencils. You have your real 2B pencil. The next most frequently used in this illustration was the airbrushes, and pepper spray, pixel spray, sprinkle airbrush, and variable splatter. And then to the lesser degree, we went with digital watercolor and used the broad water brush, and then down to real watercolor, and then just use splatter dry. And you will have to play around with it several tries just to get the look that you want, and you'll see that that's something that I had to do as well. Okay, well, that's pretty much it. I mean, again, it's just a real quick rundown on the tools that I used. The program is, again, Painter, Corel Painter 2016. If you happen to have it, well, good for you. You could follow along and maybe incorporate these into your next illustration project. If you don't have it, you can still easily do it traditionally. Photoshop, more than capable of doing the same illustration. It's going to look a little bit different just for the fact that some of the brush sets are different. So give it a try. Have some fun with it. Alright, with that said, we'll just move on to the drawing process. Hope you enjoy. Thanks a lot. Hey everyone. Okay, another drawing for you. This one I'll probably post in the Face Today. Starting out using the grid system. Nothing really new there. I've mentioned that before. You might take note that what I generally do, there by his nose, you'll see a little bit of a white line going horizontal and vertical. Sometimes I put those in just to help locate myself in the image without having to count so many blocks left, so many blocks down or up, whatever. It just gives me a focal point and a reference to start from. Keep that in mind if you choose to use this technique in your own projects. And from there, I'm just kind of, just roughing in all the important elements that I'm going to use for this illustration. Initially, it was just going to be pretty much a straightforward, kind of like a portrait pencil drawing. I wanted to use the technique that I've been using for quite some time now. I know I've used it years and years and years ago when I worked traditionally, but for some reason I never really tried to incorporate it digitally. But as of late, started playing around with it, and I've been liking the results. So right now I've gotten all the features in that I want. Now I'm just starting to shade in. Just be mindful of, you know, go slow, work it up a little bit at a time. You know, don't get too heavy-handed too soon. All right, and I'm just sort of laying things in, and with my comfort level and trying to keep the enthusiasm up, I won't focus in too much in one particular area. A couple of things to keep in mind. Take your time. Don't rush it. Because if you do, it's going to show in your work. Also, just move about the canvas. And don't focus in on one particular area for too long. Just move about and let it evenly progress. Like at this stage, I'm probably going to start hitting it back with some speckles, some noise to push it back a little bit, and then I don't want to go too far off the face without hitting the background. I need to get some tonal value back there so that I know that the tonal values of the face aren't going to be conflicting with the tonal value of the background. I've got to have some separation there. So that's what I just laid in. And so keep in mind of that. Don't go too far. Like the face, you could run into the trap of just blowing out that face and it looks really great, and then you want to put it in the background and it's going to clash. So be mindful of that. And so again, it's kind of like a push and pull technique. I've mentioned that before, probably in the last video, that I'll reach a certain point and it just starts looking a little stiff with the pencil strokes. And so I'll just grab the airbrush, again, either the neutral gray or some of the other tonal values that I've already established in the drawing. I'll start spraying over it and just pushing everything back, and then it'll just create a softer, subtle look, add some noise to the illustration, and then I'll just go in and then rework some more of the details back out. Don't be afraid to experiment. I mean, have fun with whatever projects you're working on, and don't be afraid to mess up. I mean, that's part of the learning process. That was one aspect of my art career that just really stymied me. I was just always afraid of screwing something up and not being able to recover from it, and it just kept me from trying anything new for the longest time. So at this point, you can see where now I've really laid down a lot of the speckling, just to kind of create that noise throughout. I just sprayed the whole thing for the most part, face, eyes, hair, everything, and then just to flatten things out just a little bit, and then you can see where I'm reworking a lot of the blacks and then popping out the whites again. And so again, it's a push and pull technique. I'll probably say that over and over again, but that's what it is. And so yeah, just reestablishing and taking my time to let it develop slowly. Yeah, just kind of working in the hair, no big whoop there, just kind of establishing the dark, and I'll pull out some midtones and highlights. No real trick there. It's just, you know, time. You just gotta put in the time to make things look right. And so, again, I'm starting to think about this time that possibly, you know, I would maybe want to incorporate another graphic element. Not for sure, it's just kind of rattling around in my head, and I know they're in the show. Their family has the Kraken on their banner, so I was trying to think about, okay, how would I incorporate that? And it's in my head, but not on the paper yet. I'm not going to commit myself yet. Just really want to work in those facial features, make sure I lock them in. And at this point, it's looking pretty good. There's a few little areas that are a little off. I go in later and kind of adjust those. One of his eyes is off a little bit. I think one of the ears I have to tweak out just a little bit. The hollows of his cheekbones, a little bit too deep. The bags under his eyes, but I established those relatively quick and prominent at first, because I can always push them back. It's no big deal. And so again, I'm not too worried about it. I just know that they're there and they need to be addressed. What else? My goodness. Yeah, really, it's pretty much straightforward. It's pretty easy technique. Establishing the highlights, guys. Again, thinking about what am I going to do next as far as the background element. Also, what I want to touch on is the aspect of me flipping the image back and forth. I know I've mentioned it, that it helps you to catch areas that really need to be attended to. They may be off a little bit, and by flipping it, your eye sees it from a new perspective, and you see things that you didn't notice before. Another aspect of that is I'm right-handed, and you'll see me flip the image, not necessarily just to check things, though I do that, but it's just more comfortable for me to draw on one particular side of the illustration if I flip it and then go back. Here, there was my idea. I wanted to add the Kraken to the illustration, thinking that if I created like a watery looking splash at the bottom and incorporate it where his body armor has a transitional point where the material changes, and that Kraken would be kind of like swimming up, the tentacles would wrap around in such a fashion, and I drew it in another file and imported it in, and you can see where I was just trying to play around with it. I'm not totally sold on it, but yet I didn't want to not have it there yet either. So out of not necessarily frustration, but I just wanted to say, well, I'm going to put it aside for a bit, detail out the hair some, and revisit it. We'll see what happens. And you notice that I made the image smaller overall just to accommodate the new graphic element, and then the extension underneath of his body armor there. So, or his chest plate, I guess we'll call it that, chest plate. I'm really digging kind of the texture that the Kraken has right here. I'm liking it, but even at this stage, I'm going, it's not going to work. As much as I would like it to, it's not. So I'm still pushing it, but at this point I realize it ain't going to work. And even though, with that said, I still keep rendering. I know it's a lost cause, but eventually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start inking it. Here you can see I just turned off all the other layers just so I can see my pencil without any distractions behind it, and just create a real quick black graphic representation of this Kraken. And then once I get it all filled in, I'll be able to rescale it, reposition it, and then with it being a stark black, I can at least visually see where it's going to go, how the placement's going to work or not work. So yeah, so let's let this finish filling it in, and we can talk about my trials and struggles of this. And you know, you might say, well, why didn't you just kind of sketch everything out beforehand? Well, if I was doing it traditionally, by all means, I would have, and then work out any issues that might have arisen before I even put it to paper. But digitally, you know, you can make these edits on the fly. I mean, that's the beauty of it. And here you can see I still want it down there, and I was just trying to make it work, but I gave up. New position, new idea. And here you can see where, you know, working digitally, I mean, that's quite a lifesaver, where you can just go over really quickly and just get rid of areas that you really didn't want anymore. You could do it traditionally, by all means. I mean, depending on which media you're using. But definitely really quick problem solve when you do it digitally. And here, you know, I like the positioning. I did enlarge the Kraken just a little bit more because up by the tail it was creating a tangent with the border, so I rearranged that. And then the long tentacles, I reworking those, making them a little bit longer. And then the one, you know, still, even though I thought I addressed the one tentacle so it wouldn't look like it was coming out of his ear, still sort of does, but I'm kind of putting that aside. I'm making sure that I'm going to detail out the but the rest of the drawing. Again, just moving about and not focusing in on one particular area. Just want to make sure overall the whole illustration holds together. At this point, I really wanted to make the this tentacle loop out and not look like it was being pulled back and then down. I mean, it comes pretty far down the illustration, so I wanted to make it look believable in the sense that it's reaching down a little bit farther. And then, you know, things are looking pretty good. I mean, the Kraken is popping out with a little bit of that white in the background. I'm looking at it and I'm really not completely sold with that tentacle up by his ear. So, going to have to revisit that. And so, that's what I did. I need to make it look like it's actually, at least conceivably, the same size as the other tentacle. And also, it just looked like it was coming out of his ear, so hopefully this was maybe a better fix, another solution. And yeah, I can live with that. I think I can. So yeah, really, that's pretty much it. We're pretty close to finishing up this illustration now, and just kind of noodling it here and there. Some spackle here, some sprinkles there, some splatter everywhere else, and go back in with the pencil, kind of noodle out some areas here and there, and yeah. So yeah, I tell you what, with the moments that I have left, I just want to say thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, hey, please leave them below, and I will answer them. All right, so with that said, thank you very much. Catch you next time.